Hey guys, D from J&D here. Just a little extra video today. Today I will be ranking all the Muse albums and sort of just explaining my reasonings for these rankings. This is a bit different because if you look up most of the Muse reviews and rankings of the albums you'll see out there, it's a bit different from my personal opinions. So this is why I'm doing it, because honestly, just want to talk about them, why I think some albums are really, really good, and why some are really, really not. And this is coming from a big Muse fan. I love what most of the stuff they do. Even some of the ones that get some hate, I still think can be pretty good. But let's just get started. This is the worst album by Muse, which is actually most agreed by most people, actually. Even some of the biggest critics that people don't usually agree with. The worst album, which is also their latest album, coming out in 2022, Will of the People. I have no idea where it went wrong for them. They used to be such a great band, and they made this. It starts off with the title track, which is honestly one of their worst songs. I get it, it can be satirical, it changes like the chorus, which is already annoying by itself. The will of the people, the will, the will, the will of the people. And then changes to the will of the sheeple, which it has to be satire, I feel like it is, but even if it is satire, that doesn't stop it from being such a horrible song. And really doesn't get better from there. Right after is the song Compliance, which, And right after that is Liberation, which is their ripoff of Queen, which I actually think is good. I mean, that's coming from someone who used to be a big Queen fan growing up. Like, that's like my introduction to music, so hearing something that's similar to Queen, just, I fuck with it. But right after is Won't Stand Down, which, I see people always, well, not always, but I've seen some people, most people, talk positively about this track, which led me to giving it a chance, which ultimately failed. To me, this song is nothing but an Imagine Dragons ripoff. It's really not it, especially the beginning, where it's just like, it sounds like they're gonna cover Take On Me by a-ha, and then you hear the dumb, distorted cringe instrumental that is. Ghost, How Can I Move On? I actually think the remixes, well, at least one of the remixes with the female vocalist, I forgot her name, is it Melissa? But she did a pretty good job, but still the song is really not that interesting, especially like the album version where it's just Matt singing all the stuff and just the basic piano stuff. It's just not it. You Make Me Feel Like It's Halloween. I actually really liked this one when I first heard it, because I mean, when I first heard it, it was in October, so I was already in the Halloween spirit. But my problem with the song is that it can only be enjoyed during that time, and the other time it just feels wrong. Kill or Be Killed is actually the only good song on this album. It's a really cool metalcore song. I think if I had to recommend any song to any music listener from this album, it would be Kill or Be Killed. Veronica's boring. Euphoria, it's not that bad. And it ends off with We Are Fucking Fucked, which is probably the worst Muse song I can think of currently. For the next album, which is better than Will of the People, but still not that good, Drones. So actually, this album isn't too like different from Will of the People. It just it has what makes Will of the People bad, but there's some good stuff in here. I think Dead Inside is not the worst Muse song. It's just kind of cringy, to be honest. Actually, that's the problem with the whole album. It can be really like cringe. It has the same storyline, well, almost the same storyline as Will of the People, where it has a very military-based, political, we hate government type story, which I don't mind artists talking about it if it's good, but here it's just so, especially with a song like Psycho, where like the only way I can describe Psycho is like talking to a person who hates rock and asking them to imagine what a rock song sounds like. They'll think of that, it just sounds like the most basic cringe car commercial type song. And what made it worse is that was actually I think that's the lead single from the album, which not a good choice at all. And my problem with this album, well, I guess kind of problem, but they do this quite a lot in the most recent years. I don't mind artists having like influences for like albums and songs. I think it's a good thing too. Like it can like bring some like reminiscent points. But here's some songs where like they just sound like they're unreleased, unfinished stuff from other artists. Like the song Revolt just sounds like a really bad song by The Darkness that's thankfully didn't make any albums. We got Aftermath, which I actually really enjoy, but it's really Coldplay-ish, but also can sound pretty soulless at times. Defector is another Queen ripoff, which they've done a lot of those in their discography, but this one is not their best at all. And when you thought the influences and, I guess, ripoffs couldn't get worse, they also rip off themselves with the song Mercy, which is just like some really like bootleg cheap version of Starlight from Black Holes and Revelations. But despite all that, this album really isn't their worst one. I said some stuff about Defector being a Queen ripoff, but it's not that bad. Like, kinda. I think Reapers is a good song. Very reminiscent of the old Muse, which take that as you will. And the album I would put right after that is The Second Law, which is a very controversial album for its time. Like when it first came out, it wasn't very enjoyed, which I completely understand why. It's the album they made right after the Grammy Award winning The Resistance, which I'll talk about later on. It's a really good album, just know that. But The Second Law, very front heavy. The second half, very. Don't get me wrong, I think like the first half is absolutely amazing. It's maybe some of their best stuff they ever made. Like it starts off with Supremacy, which is a great opener. Second song, Madness, which I really, really love. It's a really cool electronic pop song, which is very rare for Muse, which is why I love it so much. And I wasn't a fan of the hook when I first heard it, but it grew on me. Madness, followed by Panic Station, which is their attempt at a funk rock song, which actually works really well. A prelude, and then Survival, which is really cool too. I really like that one. It was used in the Olympics of 2012. It has this choir with a piano beginning, then it completely explodes with a Brian May riff type thing. And it's so bombastic. If I had to choose a word to like describe a song, it would either be bombastic or explosive, or just, it's not one word, but over the top. So over the top that even like Queen would be like scared with them, even though the song is very inspired by Queen. But yeah, the first half is really good. The second half though is really not good. I think Follow Me and Animals are some of the most forgettable Muse songs they've ever made. Explorers, I think, is pretty good. It's a more chill ballad type song, which I can't say is like too boring because it's a ballad, it knows what it's doing, and I respect them for that, and it's actually really beautiful at parts. But Big Freeze isn't that great right after, and then Save Me, which might be the worst one on the album. But I have to have some respect for it because it's a really rare instance of their bassist Chris doing the vocals, which I think he's a very great vocalist, but this song, it just puts you to sleep with how like lackluster it is, and it doesn't do like anything to show how great of a vocalist he is. And then the last three songs, which is an example of why this album just doesn't work for me. Liquid State, The Second Law, Unsustainable, and The Second Law, Isolated System. The reason why this album gets a lot of hate is because it's the band experimenting with a more electronic and, dare I say, dubstep type sound. And this album came out in like 2012. Dubstep was already like a dying genre by the time this was made. Not for the reason it was losing popularity, but because the stuff that was coming out from dubstep just kind of didn't have the same feel as for why dubstep was a special genre to begin with. And The Second Law just shows why it's not special. At points, it can just feel really tacky. But an album where Muse does do electronic, and they actually do it a lot better than The Second Law, is the next album I would rank right after The Second Law, Simulation Theory. I wasn't too big on this album when I first heard some of it. I actually kind of hated some of the songs on it when I first heard it. But along with this album, they made a film, like a concert film to go along with it, which is really cool because it's a concert film like no other. Like, it's a concert film that has concert, of course, but also they filmed some like really movie type stuff that really does feel like you're watching a movie that tells a really cool story, which I would recommend to anyone. And after watching the concert film, I just got like a big appreciation for the album itself. really does have a really cool story that it tells, and a really cool atmosphere and vibe that you feel throughout the whole album, which has a very futuristic 80s synth vibe, which can feel like really overdone by the time it came out, which is 2018, where everyone and their moms was trying to do it. But Muse, they do a really good job here with some songs, and a lot of the songs actually. Like the beginning song, Algorithm, which really sets the tone for the album having a really like 80s vibes. In fact, I think that's the only reason why the song exists, because the intro is like a minute and like 40 seconds long, which is just synths, and the vocals come after that whole period, which by the time it comes, it kind of just loses its special feeling. But Algorithm, besides all that, it still has a really cool atmospheric feeling. But the problem with this album is like, yes, some parts can sound really cool with the synths, a big improvement. Some of the songs just don't. There's still some like dubstep wubs and just unneeded synths here and there. Like there's a song Dig Down, which I actually pretty like. It's a really like gospel type song, which I actually really like. Again, from the Queen stuff. But um in the song there's like a weird dubstep like bass in the background because they're trying to be futuristic. But if you're making a gospel type, still some sort of like gospel rock song, you don't need some like dubstep instrumental in it. You don't need some dubstep whoops in your gospel rock song. Which is why, like, if I want to listen to Dig Down, I much prefer the acoustic gospel version on the deluxe version of the album. Actually, speaking of the deluxe version of the album, there's some really cool songs, like some really cool extras that are like remixes and just different versions of songs from the album. Like, there's a really cool marching band remix of Pressure, which is a really like really interesting choice for like a marching band to cover this song. But I can see it, and it works really really well. And it doesn't have the synth futuristic stuff, obviously, because it's a marching band, but it's still like really like banger. I mean, to be fair, like the song Pressure from the original album was already pretty good. I think that was like one of the best ones, and it became a single, which is much deserved. I think it's really good. And then there's a remix of Something Human, which is just more acoustic, which I think is pretty good too. I have a loving taste for acoustic remixes, but I can't say the same for the Propaganda acoustic remix. When I first heard the original Propaganda from the album, I actually really hated it. I thought it was really annoying, but it grew on me since. I think like the sexy beat it has, like the dum, dum, ch, dum, ch, is really an interesting choice for Muse. Kind of reminds me of Madness, especially with like one of the weirdest openings they've ever made, which is also really similar to Madness because the intro is propaganda, propaganda, and then Madness, mad, mad, mad. And there's just a lot of like cool stuff in Propaganda that really grew on me, like the backing vocals, like that can't lose, along with like some cool synths and cool guitar stuff, electric guitar stuff you'll hear. Even though there's a really bluesy slide guitar, acoustic guitar solo in Propaganda, which actually I think it works really, really well. But the acoustic version of Propaganda just removes everything that made it cool. Overall, this album is like still not their best, but it has some really cool like songs on it, like Pressure I mentioned, Propaganda. Something Human is pretty good. Thought Contagion, I thought that was good. Oh, Thought Contagion, and Blockades is pretty good too. But there's still some songs here that just don't appeal to me very well, like Break It To Me, Get Up and Fight, and parts of the original version of Dig Down, even though I really did say I really like the acoustic gospel version of the song. Still not their best, not their worst album. And up next is, this is like where like the list of albums start like getting progressively better. And right next on this list is Showbiz, which is their debut. I find myself being like more like softer towards debuts because that's where they start. Obviously, it's not going to be like their best work. At least it shouldn't be, because you're only supposed to get better from your first release. Tell that to Maroon 5. Showbiz, I think it's a pretty good album too. Like, despite being their first, they do have some really good songs on it. Like, they have some really like cool songs here, despite being their first. Like, it's a more heavier album, which if you like Muse being more on the heavier side, then you'll like this, actually. There's some really cool songs like Unintended, Muscle Museum, Uno, Overdue. The title track is also really cool. Really, there's just not much I can say that's really like too bad about this album, besides the fact like the only like critical thing I can say is it's not their best, but it shouldn't be, and I respect it for that reason, that they're starting off with an album still this good. My favorite is the closing track, Spiral Static. Even though it's obviously not their most bombastic, it's a really cool blend of like their more mellow side, but also their more slightly heavier side. And I think the chorus, like even though the words aren't as audible, the melody I thought stood out to me in a way. Yeah, I think it's pretty good. I haven't have much to say about this besides, if you want your own opinion on it for being its debut, check it out yourself. Next album, Absolution, which some people actually regard as their best album. Which, I mean, you can have your own opinion on the band, but it's not my favorite, but I still respect it for being a really good album. It starts off with like a 23-second long intro, which, I mean, if you're having an intro for an album, I can't say much about it. But then it goes into Time Is Running Out, which I think is really good. I think the chorus is like very, I guess you can say catchy. Our time is running out. Our time is running out. But before that is Apocalypse Please, which I think is also a pretty good song too. I like the instrumentation of it. I think I messed up the track listing. I accidentally said Time Is Running Out is after the intro. But you know, it's whatever. Sing for Absolution is also a great one. I like the sort of piano type intro, and then the groove, I think it's really nice. Can be kind of similar to 21 Guns by Green Day, which you might disagree with, but I don't care. Stockholm Syndrome is one of my favorites from the album. It's one of their more heavier ones. I like the guitar riff. It's like, it sounds like you're in for like a really speedy track, but then the drums come in like to settle the tone more down. And it's a really unique choice, but it works. You got Hysteria, which has the really iconic bass intro, which is honestly really impressive that you can do like 16 notes with just doing this and still sound really clear. I'm not too big on the final few tracks. I think it kind of gets a bit boring from there, but besides that, it's not as front heavy as it was for the Second Law. I can still respect the final few songs, even though like it can feel boring, but it's still pretty good. And right after is Origin and Symmetry, which actually is regarded by people to be their best album. I don't know what is like regarded as the best album by Muse, because it's always a different answer that you're gonna hear. Like even like my answer for the best Muse album, which you'll hear later on, is not the most popular answer, but I have my reasons for why it's so good. But Origin and Symmetry is still a really cool album. It's also their second album to be made, and the fact that it's still this good just blows me away. You got one of the best openings, Newborn, followed by Bliss, which is great. You got Hyper Music and Plug-in Baby, which is just, and then Citizen Erased right after, which is just such a crazy like run of songs. And Microcuts right after, just adding more to how great it is. And just the album, like the way it progresses, it just gets better and better. Even like a cover of Nina Simone's Feeling Good. And Feeling Good is originally like a more Broadway type song, but Muse just made it their own and made it much more heavier. And they do a really good job on it, and I have to respect them for that, because it's still a really, really good song. Megalomania is the closer, which has this really cool organ, which it's crazy like what inspired like what, because I read an interview saying that it was inspired by Queen's Who Wants to Live Forever. And then after this song came out, Fix You by Coldplay got inspired by Megalomania. So it's just like my favorite artists like being on top of each other in the span of inspirations, which that was sort of like a weird like thing to point out, but it was special to me. But yeah, this album is just really cool, a really cool space rock type album, and it deserves all the love it gets. And right next is second best Muse album, which was originally like my number one, but after some more relisting, I kind of, in more recent days, I've preferred the number one album on top of this. The second best Muse album to me is Black Holes and Revelations, which people are going to be complaining, like saying, oh, why isn't this number one? Why? But honestly, I can understand why people think it's the best, and if you say this is the best, then I probably will still like you. It starts off with Take a Bow, which kind of does what Simulation Theory does, just set the tone for what aesthetic this album is gonna do. But I think they do a much better job with Take a Bow, and has some really like Queen inspired background vocals. The lyrics are kind of mean, but it's still good. Second song, Starlight, which is one of my favorite Muse songs. I like the piano in it. It sounds like something you would find in Wii Sports Resort. Dun, 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 dun. We got Supermassive Black Hole, which you may remember if you watched Twilight, which honestly it deserves the popularity. It has a really nice guitar riff. And then you got the very Britney Spears type drums in the back, which is pretty rare for a song like this, but it just sets the tone for the song like really well. That's a more like slutty type vibe, which I really think is cool. And also like a Soldier's Poem, which is a really underrated song on the album, but it got confused by Matt Bellamy thinking that it was on Absolution. um, I don't know how that happens. Got Invincible, which pretty good. Assassin, pretty good too. I mean, they're good songs. I don't know what to say about them, but they're still really good. I really like them, especially Assassin with like the backing vocals, which isn't like common for a song this heavy. It's one of their more metal type songs, which you might disagree with, which I think is perfectly okay. Just kiss my ass. But there's like some really like cool backing like harmonies, and the chorus, which turns to like a really falsetto type voice. Exopolitics, which sounds like a Queen song, which works here. It works way better than it does for songs like Liberation off of Will of the People. I'm trying to think of some more, but if I'm gonna talk about Queen stuff, it'll be for the next album, which if you there's been an album missing here, which I haven't talked about yet, but you're gonna hear it next. And the track list just keeps getting better and better, which all leads up to the final song, which people claim to be the best Muse song, which I can see. It's a really cool song. There's nothing much like it. It's Nice of Sidonia. You might know it if you played Guitar Hero. It's a really like cool song. There's not much I can say to describe it. It's like a really cool combination of like oh, there's a car honk. It's a really cool combination of like some Western rock type stuff, and then some hard rock and space rock stuff here and there. Mariachi rock. I almost said mariachi rock, but I mean, I guess you can say, but some mariachi vibes in there with the trumpets in the back going. That's the worst impression of a trumpet I've ever done. But if I can't say much to describe it because of how like just over the top and amazing it is. If you're gonna have an opinion on Nice of Sidonia, I just recommend it you check out yourself. And the best album on this list, which people will disagree with me because when it first came out in 2009, it didn't get all love, and people actually considered it to be their worst album, which I really much disagree with. I think it's a really good album. It's The Resistance, which is the most latest album we just reviewed. Starts off with Uprising, which it kind of it's a really good song, but it kind of got ruined for me because of Coldplay's People with the Pride. It has the same riff. Second song, The Resistance, not The Resistance, but just Resistance, I guess you can say it's the title track because it has the word, but if it had the "the," then I feel like it would be the title track. I like the song a lot. It has some really cool Queen-inspired vocals. I can talk about Queen more because this album is so inspired by Queen in the best ways possible. You could be wrong, but I shouldn't be right. I think it's just really cool. And it has a great message too. Undisclosed Desires, one of the more sexy songs, which they've had their fair share of sexy songs. Like I thought Propaganda the Beat was pretty sexy. I don't know where I'm going with this, but if you're gonna do the fun stuff with your partner to any Muse song, I'd 100% recommend Undisclosed Desires. Very Timbaland inspired song. United States of Eurasia is my favorite Muse song, to be honest. Again, I'm gonna bring up Queen again because if you're gonna compare any Muse song to Queen, it would be United States of Eurasia, with the harmonies and the big impact. It's just it's a really cool symphonic rock song. It starts off slow on piano and just rises from there, where all the instruments come in. You'll hear some really cool drums in the impact with the strings and piano combined. It's just absolutely like an amazing feel. It feels like you're not even watching a movie, but it feels like you're in a movie. It's like a really cool like piano rock song, but then you have the really cool symphonic strings in it, which is absolutely amazing. It gives off a really cool vibe. And then you got the really operatic type section near the end of the original song, because there's a bonus track which we'll talk about soon. But before this song ends, you hear the Eurasia, Shaw, Shaw. It's really fun. I can understand why people think it's goofy, why it's silly, which is why it gets some of the hate it does. But I don't care. It's still a really good song. And it's also like one of the more underrated songs on The Resistance. It has some of the lowest streams from the album because it just didn't get popular. Especially the ending, which I think is really cool. It has a bonus track called Collateral Damage, which is just a piano instrumental with some strings and some vocals here and there. It's just an arrangement of Nocturne in E flat major by Chopin. And I understand why some people wouldn't be into that, but I think it's a really cool way to close such a bombastic track. And then following that is Guiding Light, which is such a crazy way to follow up after United States of Eurasia. It's it's very synthy with some very powerful vocals. And then right after is a natural selection, which is one of my favorites from the album, along with Eurasia. It's just a really like interesting song. Like it has two parts to it, which one is like really fast with a really cool organ to begin with, and also really like I guess the chorus of it. I don't know if it's. I guess you could say it's a chorus. It's a natural selection. I want the truth. And it slows down, and then after that slow section with like Matt's like very despairy vocals, it goes back to the fast pace section, which is just like such a cool pause, and then followed by MK Ultra, which is such a it really grabs your nuts in the beginning with the synths and guitar. Followed by I Belong to You, which has a bonus track. I'll talk about that in a bit, but you may recognize I Belong to You because it was also in the Twilight saga. And it's a good song. It actually has its own different mix on the Twilight Saga. Specifically the New Moon mix, which takes the original song but removes the bonus track and adds a lot more funky guitar. But to talk about the album version, it feels like it'll be shortened in the beginning. Well, I guess in the main song, I guess you can say, because it ends quicker. But then it transitions into a more of like a French opera. And it's one of the only instances of Matt Bellamy singing in French, which some people wouldn't like because some parts of his pronunciation is off. But despite all that, it's still a really cool, I guess, like bonus track. And then when the song is about to end, he just changed the lyrics from the original French opera song to I Belong to You. And then he does he brings back the vocal run from the original song, the whoa, 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 whoa. And then it transitions back into I Belong to You, and it starts at the clarinet solo, which is so cool, and it gets overlooked at a lot, but it's so cool, so tough. And if you like the operatic section and just the symphonic feeling, then you'll really like the last three songs on this album, which is it's a 3-in-1. It's part of this like whole like trilogy called Exogenesis, which is Muse's attempt at a more symphonic type feel, and they do it really good. But yeah, there is my ranking and list and reasoning for the Muse discography. They have some of the worst stuff I've ever heard, and then some of the best I've ever heard. And hopefully this list will change your view on the band if you liked them or hated them before. Hopefully you keep playing them, because I still do. I think they're a really good band, and they deserve the praise they get and some of the hate they get at the same time. I'm saying that as a Muse fan. But yeah, hope you guys enjoy this. See you guys.